Okay, very well. Thank you all for being here. This is the second workshop for the grad school series. This presentation will focus on a reminder of the application components and also how you finance a grad program or certain things you might consider funding a grad program, particularly for undocumented students. It doesn't mean the information doesn't apply broadly in general to any program or any status. It's just that my work is focused on providing information for undocumented students and navigating this process. Okay. However, I welcome questions at any point in the recording, and I'll make the information available to you. Very well. So just a brief recap for those of you that were not in my first workshop. And even though you can access the presentation online, I do want to remind you that as I was sharing with some of you here, my name is Juan Ruiz. I attended UC Santa Cruz since 2015. I transferred as a philosophy major, double major in critical race and ethnic studies, and then I did a master's. Now I'm doing my PhD in Latin American and Latino studies. And another one of my specialties on the side is also launching a business or helping you launch a business or navigate entrepreneurship, particularly when you're undocumented. But again, the information applies to everyone. And so I founded a limited liability company to be able to employ folks and to also get hired as a contractor. So that's just a little bit about me. The calendar link is live where you can attend my office hours. They can be either virtual or in person. I can help you develop a business or I can assist you in navigating your grad school application as well. Okay, very well. And I am undocumented and without DACA. And so then that's why a lot of the information is shaped not only with what is out there, but by my experience. So in the first workshop, and I'm just gonna breeze over these points because you could see that recording and that presentation, but there are some basic considerations when you are thinking of applying to and attending grad school, such as like, why are you trying to do this? What is grad school, right? Or where would you study? And some ways to answer some of this information are like, what are expectations? What are the differences in degrees? Cost benefits is that you might be seeking to expand your knowledge on a particular subject or interested in research, as well as something more material, such as you want to practice law. And so then, excuse me a second. Hey, come on in. I paused the recording. Come on in, have a seat. Please have some food. If you'd like now or after, it's the matter. We have just gotten started. How's it going so far? It's kind of weird to look this way and then the recording is in front of me and whatever. Um, we just got started. Some basic considerations about grad school. Um, but yeah, my colleague here, Raul, is in grad school. So if you have any questions, Raul is also another point of view in education. Very well. I think I'll continue the recording, but just wanted to let you know. Thank you for joining us. Uh, I you're gonna have access to this presentation, and you can also schedule time to speak with me one-on-one about your application or like launching a business if that is something that interests you. And I've studied here as a transfer student, BA, MA, and I'm now a PhD student in LALS. Okay, brief recap. So let's continue this. And I'm recording so that we can upload the webinar online. Is that okay? Very well. Okay, we should continue. So another reason, for example, if you might pursue grad school, aside from it being interesting and you want to expand your knowledge of a particular subject, is if you want to practice law, let's say, or you want to practice medicine, then you need a medical degree or you need a law degree, right? So then grad school is very like necessary in that instance. Um, Some of the wrong reasons to pursue grad school might be that there is no other option or you don't have anything else to do after graduation. I'm not saying that's not the case. It happens to a lot of us where this might be the better option of no option at all. But it is a lot to consider where you're going to be at a program for, let's say, 3 to 7 years, depending on the type of degree. And also, there's a lot of things you want to consider before you make a decision of going somewhere and studying. Another one of the things we covered last time is that of the application, you will have a personal statement that you must draft. This is often the first document that is read in your application components. And maybe the most important. I've been told by some professors these are the most important pages you're going to write in the next 10 years. Because if you want to go to this institution or this program, then the personal statement is going to matter a whole lot. Um, the personal statement is different than the statement of purpose. I mean, the personal statement is the same. The statement of purpose is the most important one. The personal statement might be optional, but the statement of purpose is basically showing that why you are a good fit for that program, why it is that they should take you as part of that cohort. A personal statement is more like what makes you unique to the whole group that they will be bringing on board to that program. So it showcases like your personal trajectories, some of the maybe challenges you had, but not only listing those, but saying how you overcame them and how they shaped your academic interest and your journey. It might also show some skills of your personal character, things of that matter. The statement of purpose basically uh, showcases why it is that you want to be in grad school, why that program, why that school, why those folks that you're going to be working with and studying for the next few years. So you might say some things about the department, of what makes them unique, the school, those faculty that you want to do research with, and say why you're a good fit. Um, in my other presentation, I provide resources where you can access examples of statements of purpose or personal statements. One that I might mention right now is Científico Latino. Hey, please have a seat. Thank you for being here. Científico Latino, for those of you that have an interest in STEM, as I heard from some of you, will give you a list of the schools where folks applied and got admitted, and they have the statement and the purpose and the personal statement there for you to download and make use of. Científico Latino. Or you could just check out my other presentation, and it has the links too. There will be testing requirements depending on the program that you are applying to. So some in the social sciences or humanities will use the GRE exam. The sciences, medical school, will use the MCAT. If you want to practice law, you will have to do the LSAT. You have to register for these exams on time, ahead of time. Look at their schedules when the exam is offered, and you want to coordinate that with your application deadlines as well, because some schools will take your application only with the exam score ahead of time. Others might accept your application and look at your score after the exam once the score is sent. So there's all these subtle differences in every application and exams. As I mentioned earlier, you will have to use, particularly for undocumented folks, bring your passport or US driver's license, the original document, no copies. It has been known that folks don't have the right documents when they present themselves to do the exam, and they lose their slot and they have to pay again. And it's between 250 to 300 and plus dollars. Um, you can reach out to them ahead of time in the link there for waivers, accommodations, and information that might not be presented, but you want to become acquainted with this exam. Depending on the application you're completing, you want to become acquainted with how to take the exam. The exam sometimes doesn't test what you know, but it tests how you're able to take the exam, what you know about taking the exam. And so it's not one of those things that you want to wing and then just show up for. You're paying a whole lot of money. It has sections. It might be a little intimidating based like how you do with test taking in general, but you do show up to a place, there's a metal detector, you leave your belongings in a locker, you sit in a cubicle, the cubicle has a camera and it's looking at you, so there's no cheating going on. Yeah, become acquainted with all of this protocol. And some applications don't require these tests at all. Some have been opting out, steering away from standardized tests because they're not made for diverse communities. And so then, or with folks like us in mind. And so a lot of programs are opting out of taking these tests, and it might not be a requirement in your application. Maybe you want to apply only to the programs that don't require the grad test, and that's fine. Do you remember that the grad test? Oh, there's a trailer. Do remember that grad tests are not the only component in the application. There's a statement of purpose. Maybe there's a personal statement for financial aid considerations. There's also your letters of recommendation, your GPA, transcripts, all those things. But it is one of those things that you will have to take, especially if you're going into law or medicine. Letters of recommendation are very important for your grad school application. They're one of the most important pillars. They come right after, I believe, the statement of purpose. So they'll see what it is that you want to do in the program and then who's recommending you. You want to get strong letters of recommendation by professors, faculty, someone who supervised your work, not a TA. You never want to get a letter that from someone who says, "Yeah, write it and I'll sign it." It's like asking your loved one to write you a letter. You're only going to say the good things. That's not a strong letter. Strong letters make the difference in you getting into the department or getting funding, getting nominated for a fellowship. And we'll get into what are fellowships. There's the component of when you complete your applications when you complete the grad school applications, every application looks different, but you will have to upload like the information of who's recommending you, and then they receive an email, for example. They receive an email saying, hey, your letter of recommendation is due by this deadline to recommend this student. There's something called waiving the right to read the letter. You as the student, you waive the right, which what that means is that whomever writes you a letter, they will upload it to the portal and you won't read it. This is one of those like unwritten curriculum sort of things that there's mixed responses or opinions. But one would be if you waive the right, meaning that you don't read it, you show that you're confident and whatever is said between the recommender and whoever is going to take you into the program, it's completely confidential and you never get to see it. It's up to you. I always waive the right, so I never read the letters. And it just from what I was told, it just shows that you have nothing that you need to see there. Leave it up to them. Any questions up to this point? Any comments? Okay. Like I said, this is very brief. I go more in depth into how you even request the letter. What does the email look like when you're requesting a letter? What should you provide whoever is recommending you in my other recording? But just glimpsing over it, maybe you might want to inform a professor ahead of time. Hey, I would like to meet and ask you for a letter of recommendation. I'm applying to these programs. And once you're in their office hours, for example, you remind them, I took a course with you in the spring, and this is what I got my grade on. Maybe you also take that opportunity to say, I turned in a final paper or my final presentation, which I would like to develop further to use as a sample for my applications. There's a lot of things that you can do in those office hours. And when the professor says, yes, I'll write you the letter, you want to provide them with a copy of the statement of purpose so that they can see if you align well for that program. Maybe they can suggest other schools that you might not know of to work with other professors because they're in conversation and they might think you're better fitted for this other school that you would not apply if they don't tell you. You might have to provide a resume or a CV to showcase your fellowship, research experiences, a sample. It looks different in every discipline. It might be a writing sample in the humanities and social sciences. It might be an art portfolio in the arts or a website. It depends what application you're completing. A copy, an unofficial copy of your transcripts. And then I provide you a sample in that link. Visit it later, but it shows you basically how you would draft that email and what to do next so that you don't forget these little details. As you might already have seen, there's a lot that goes into an application, and this might just be me overthinking it. No route is the same. Um, Maybe you might overthink other areas than others, and totally normal. It's just like a whole side job that you're gonna have of sorts also while you're trying to graduate. Contacting the department is very important because for the students I work with, it's important to know if there are funding packages that are not tied to federal funds. If work authorization is required for funding your grad education. So just very basic, when you have applied to UCSC as an undergrad, you applied to the school, right? And you might have a declared major or you might not. The school takes you in and the school provides you a financial aid package. When you apply to a graduate program, you're also applying to the school, but it's more precise that you're applying to that department. It might be the Department of Engineering. And so then they might hire, I don't know, 15 students in a year, while LALS, where I'm at, we only take in like 3 or 5 students. And so then every department is different, how much funding they have to hire more grad students, how those students get funded. It's different than when you're an undergrad. As a graduate student, if you don't have a fellowship is like, think of it as a package of funds that provide you professional development and experience in your research, but it's funds that are not tied to TA ships. So you all might have section with the TA. The TA has to do this work to be able to pay for their education. At the same time, they might have coursework to complete or are doing their exams, their qualifying exams, and writing their research on the side. So there's a difference between having a TA ship and a graduate student research appointment or a graduate student instructor, as opposed to getting a fellowship that might not require that of you, and it's just funds for you to study. Okay, so contacting the department about those financial aid options is recommended. Reaching out to their graduate students because they're the ones that are in the department. There's always a grad rep, 1 or 2 grad reps in every department who might be open to answering some questions and meeting with you. And there's a lot of information you can get from students that you don't get online. All right. Like I said, you might have to complete a resume and STEM resumes if you might already know this, but different from the humanities and social sciences, are often there's keywords that are identified by artificial intelligence. So there's a particular way that you might want to build your resume to include certain words that you don't get weeded out per se. And it's not just a cut and paste template for everyone in the field. There's a lot of examples in the websites that I shared with you earlier, like Científico Latino, or if you visit the Career Center here, or even in my one-on-one time, I can assist you with drafting your resume or CV. That's more or less like the very basics that I covered more in depth earlier about grad school application components. The focus of this presentation was more on how you even finance your grad education when you are undocumented and without work authorization. So that's going to be another focus of the next slides and some general advice along the way. But I can entertain questions up to this point. Okay. As I mentioned earlier, your grad versus your undergrad financial aid is different. Uh, I think I covered that already, but it is important to know that some applications have the personal statement or a financial aid personal statement. They're meant precisely to align you with fellowships or scholarships. So do remember that sometimes your application to the program might be one component, but there's a separate financial aid application. And some programs will tell you this, but that's the importance of the diversity statement or the personal statement. I know that sometimes we might um, not be okay with sharing a lot about our personal story, but there's moments when it aligns you with financial aid opportunities that shape if you're going to be TAing for the next 5 years, or maybe you get a fellowship. Okay. The California Dream Act application in place of the financial of the FAFSA application for undocumented folks. There's always the question of whether you should complete it or not after you graduate as an undergrad. And the advice that I have generally have seen is that you should continue to complete it because it might be very simple along the way. It's a lot of the information doesn't change every year. At the same time, state schools are different than research institutions and private schools. Some might not use it at all, right? Because you don't get a financial aid package as an undergrad when you're a grad student. However, state schools, I have known of students whose DREAM Act application, it was a document that they could show, I have an unmet need. My expected family contribution is still zero. And then they get lined up with certain scholarships and financial aid options. So I would recommend to continue um, completing it, even though you graduate, because you just don't know what school might take you and how it can serve you. The same for the AB 540 non-resident tuition waiver. When you're an undergrad, you must complete it so that you can qualify for in-state tuition. And even if you go to the same institution, when you're a grad, you need to complete it again. I've seen students who didn't complete it and they don't understand why they're getting charged an extra $25,000 a year. And it's just because the graduate division and the undergraduate divisions are literally a division where you still need to render the documents again when you are enrolled as a grad student. Okay, so just wanted to clarify if it hasn't been made clear. Teaching assistantships, graduate student researchships, and instructor of record appointments require work authorization. So these are the opportunities that are for undocumented students only open to those that have work authorization, such as DACA or temporary protective status. And students who, even though they might qualify for in-state tuition, and our 8540 students, if they don't have work authorization, they cannot take on TAs, GSRs, and instructor of record appointments. And so what this means is that there's still an unmet need in the services that are provided to undocumented students without work authorization at the grad level. So if you don't have it, the traditional 5 year guarantee for funding, which is what the UCs have or UCSC has. When you're brought in as a grad student, they offer you for 5 years that guarantee that you're going to be able to pay for your studies and you're going to get a salary, a base salary rate, right? If you can't work for it, then you're hired, you're admitted to the program, but if the program doesn't have funds and the institution doesn't have options for you to work without work authorization, then you're at a dead end. And it's been the case. A lot of students that reach out to me in my role as grad student mentor tell me, hey, I don't have work authorization. And I got admitted into this department and now I don't know what to do. The department doesn't have funds and they're giving me a package that requires work authorization. And so then in that case, it's time to get creative, see if the university has other endowments or pockets of funds to fund the student. And if they don't, students are often turned away, or probably they got into another school and they're over there now. But that is the case. Still a lot of work to do there. So to bypass this, I've heard a lot of students are trying, like if they want to stay at an institution and create some sort of internship and fellowship, and I'll show you some steps to do that. But now the trend is applied to private schools, applied to the Ivy Leagues, and or maybe the Midwest. Maybe there's undocumented friendly campuses that have funds, um, and they're able to provide you with a package that is not tied to work authorization. So that's the recommendation. So as I say, not all is lost. There's ways to outreach ahead of time because there is a lot of work that goes into an application. You might feel sometimes drained or embarrassed or overwhelmed, and I've been there, I feel you. But you can always ask more questions to the department, such as, hey, I don't see it online, but do you have uh, options for undocumented students without work authorization? Or do you are the options that you offer for this scholarship that is advertised directly tied to federal funds that you're not allowed to open it to undocumented students? It's often the case that it's just the way language is used. And maybe some scholarships are not tied to federal funds and can be open to undocumented students. And so it's a little bit of that advocacy that it takes, or the way they might have gotten creative with funding a student who doesn't have work authorization. They might not advertise that online, but it's there. Somebody's working on it. So it's good to be proactive and call. In my role as undocumented uh, student services grad fellow, I can also reach out on your behalf. You don't have to do it. Like, hey, Juan, I have a list of schools. Can you ask them what they have? And then I will do that, and then I will get you that information. Can always set up a one-on-one with me for that. So yeah, some examples of some of the questions. Can we open this opportunity to undocumented students? Uh, let me see. Is this fellowship, for example, linked to undocumented-friendly donor funds? It might be the case that the Don Rothman donor endowment, whatever, but it doesn't say on the website it's for undocumented students, but it was always meant to be. So maybe that's being proactive about reaching out and saying, hey, this particular thing. Or can you offer other funds and like place me somewhere on campus to work and they pay me and then I'm in your department. So there's many ways to go about it. So as I mentioned earlier, a scholarship is different from a fellowship and a grant and a loan. Here's some basics. Scholarships awarded for financial need, grades, community service, while fellowships, they fund students and non-students. Maybe you're placed in the summer doing research elsewhere, right? It offers some sort of professional and career development, and you study a specific field, research an issue, develop an organization. There's many examples. However, some fellowships might require employment authorization. So you have to be aware of that. Um, Grants are just financial aid that does not require repayments. It's money that's given to you, and that's often the case that of how undocumented students are funded. And loans, of course, that might be the last option. It is always the last option for me because these are borrowed funds that you might have to repay with interest. And undocumented friendly loans are quite scarce. There's not a lot of them. Um, but there are some like in the institutions or the Sallie Mae loan, things like that. So don't give up. I know that, for example, if you want to practice medicine, there's a component of having to do your residency and work, and it might require work authorization. There are medical schools that are working ways around this. So the Stritch School of Medicine, for example, in Chicago, is very open about deliberately supporting undocumented folks with or without DACA. So I would check them out. Another way to finance your grad application or to even begin is, for example, a summer opportunity doing research at another university. where you're getting paid to do this, and they might prepare you to take the exam for the application. They might assist you in mentorship, in drafting your statement of purpose, personal statements, and you might meet a professor or a grad student who aligns you well with the program. So I know students who have benefited from programs like this. Um, I attended a program like this in Boston that I got a lot of mentorship where I was able to draft my application components and then turn them in. Even though I didn't end up going to that school, it's experience and it's valuable. You might be doing research and use that as your work sample. Yes.
Do you know UCSC has a program like that in the summer?
We can look that up. We can look that up. I know that UCI and the problem is that a lot of these programs, the application expired like in January because they're setting you up for the summer. But that's why I provided the link and it has an interest form and the applications open in December and they close in January. But if you don't do it this year, if you're a junior, sophomore, or whatever, and you have another year, do get into the practice of looking at these summer programs that might fly you out, give you room and board, pay you, and you get experience that is crucial for applying to the grad school. And it'll be more or less around that time, December to January. But I don't know about UCSC. I do know that other schools have it, but let's check. Yes, this is another example of, so for example, Stanford has a SURF, Summer Undergraduate Research Fellowship, and these are all Undocu student friendly. The one that I participated in was PIXI at MIT, and IRT, Institute for Recruitment of Teachers in Boston. So if you're interested in being a professor, something like IRT is a great example of a program because they fly you out, they pair you with a mentor, you're out there with another 50 students, building community, and you're all interested in becoming professors in the long run, right? Or educators. And they will support you with your application components, your personal statements, and purpose, writing sample, doing drafts of that, but they will also pay for up to 10 applications. Aside from giving you room and board and flight and funds, 10 applications might be anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500 of applications that you don't have to pay for. So I would get in the practice of doing that. Yes. You have to check those deadlines. So these are all live links to where you can go. And if you don't apply this year, you can apply the next. Because it'll be similar to a grad application. You'll have to draft your statement of purpose, get a recommendation from someone.
Let's say like you graduated undergrad, but like you wanted to do that, but you're taking a gap year. Could you apply to this?
There's programs that do take you. The UCI does that. So it's also meant for MA students or juniors, seniors pursuing a PhD. So yeah, that's a good one. That's a good question. Because it's also an opportunity for you to take courses there or seminars and get exposure to different ways of doing research, and also for you to determine, is this even something that I want to do? If you might consider that you want to do something like this and there's a deadline coming up for a letter of recommendation, one thing that I mention all the time is to approach your professor before. So, for example, we're going to start the new quarter, right, in the spring. Approach your professor ahead of time in office hours and say, I'm going to take this course and I'm going to apply to grad school. So, can you please be on the lookout for my work? I will be asking for a letter of recommendation after the course. And so then, yes. No, you're good.
Actually, can you like start asking for letters of like and like get like a almost like a progress of the professors to like do it for you in a letter of recommendation?
That would be a good practice because I'm setting the example of like I waited till the last year, I'm gonna graduate after the spring and I don't have a letter. And so I'm setting the example of if that's the worst case scenario, then you want to say, be on the lookout for my work. Like I'm gonna give you my best work and let's workshop it because I want a letter, right? The other example is if you're thinking about this 2, 3 years from now and considering who can give me a better, who can, maybe you take a class with the professor and you take a second class. So now there's more work, there's more of a relationship going on there. And if that is the case, you might also, after it's often the case, I'm not saying this is you or it was me, you turn in your final papers and you never see them again. You're like, that's it. That's the last time I had to see them. But it can also be that you go back after that break and say, hey, I actually want to go over the feedback you gave me on my paper. I would like to improve it and refine it because I'm going to use this as an example for my work sample for my grad application. If that is the case, then you have the letter from the professor, a polished paper, and you build a report, and that translates into your application. That would be the better practice. Yeah, good idea. Okay. There are sites like Immigrants Rising that provides fellowships and scholarships in real time where you can filter out your major or the type of opportunity you're looking for. Live link, check them out. And if there's like one of the last options, or probably if the institution has funds, so say you do apply to a private school and they say, we have funds, but we don't know how to create a fellowship so that we can pay you and you can work on your program. Something like this would work, where it's an example from Immigrants Rising of how to create a fellowship, how to break that down, how to provide the professional development, how to pay the student, step by step sort of deal. Um, it's not it's not the best case that we have to do the work for them, but it might also be that we just provide the information and they create the opportunity and we're able to continue studying. So I would check them out if that is the case. For when I did my master's, I had to do something like this. I reached out to someone that had funds, but they didn't know how to put it together so that I could do my program. And so then I said, well, why don't I do this that I'm doing right now? Because nobody else is doing it. And then that's like, of course, there was paperwork that we had to submit and show this is what it looks like in writing, as you can see in the example right there. But in practice, this is what I was doing. And I was getting paid to cover my tuition fees and to survive. So it's a practice that I would recommend. I mentioned earlier, there are some loans that undocumented folks can apply to because federal loans and Pell Grants are not an option. And I would check them out, the Sallie Mae loan or the Discover loan. You might need someone who's a citizen to be your co-signer, but there are some options. We have what is it, the Dream Loan at UCSC for undocumented folks with DACA? I think it's called the Dream Loan. And another good practice to get into when you're considering grad school, there's a lot of these guides out there. This is only one example. This is from New York State Leadership Council. You can download it. It's a live link, but they cover from California, New York, New Jersey, and Washington. What are the laws that affect enrollment for undocumented folks? And what are some things you want to consider? What's the difference in one program than the other, licenses, degrees, things of that nature. Santa Clara Law Digital Commons does something very similar, particularly with law. Check them out. And lastly, I think this is my last slide. There's a growing network of undocumented grad students, and in the University of Michigan, these folks are are reaching out and keeping track of who's where so that we can share best practices. They are the UndocuGrads at the University of Michigan. I would check them out on Instagram. They also put together a toolkit for applying to grad school, surviving grad school. That's a whole different show. And check them out. They're super cool. I spoke to them a couple days ago. They had a call across the US and there were about 23, 26 undocugrads. If that's interesting to you, check them out. And other sources that I mention every time I present because there's always someone who doesn't know about my Undocumented Life blog or PhD Dreamers for those of you who might be interested in medicine or the healthcare field, where you complete your DREAM Act application. And if grad school is one option, but you also might think of like, I want to launch a business, check out spark.immigrantsrising.org. They have a lot of useful videos, worksheets, and information that I share all the time. Lastly, Undocu Basic Needs Project is one of the newest hubs of information that compiles a lot of the other links that I showed you. And they cover things from entrepreneurship, mental health, basic needs, applying to grad school, and things of that nature. So yeah, no one single route is the same. It's going to look different for all of you. You might only apply to one school, your top school, when you get in. You might have to create a checklist and apply to 10 and you don't get in until the next round. You never know, things change. But you have to make a name for yourself, create your own approach. And I'm here as your resource. Even beyond your graduation, I will be here and I can support you. So that's it. Here's my information. You can get a hold of me. Thank you. Thank you.